My mother-in-law poisoned me at a wedding while I was in labor with her granddaughter. She gave birth alone in the venue bathroom because her mill preferred her other daughter's perfect wedding, and what she confessed after destroyed the entire family. I'm 29 years old. My name is Heather. I'm an accountant. And 3 months ago, I gave birth to my daughter Penelope under circumstances that I still struggle to process. When people ask me how the birth went, I don't even know where to start, because what happened that day was so fucking surreal that sometimes I wonder if it actually happened or if it was some kind of nightmare induced by pregnancy hormones. But it happened, and my mother-in-law Nancy almost killed my baby and me because of her sick obsession with controlling absolutely everything in my husband Brian's life. I guess I should start from the beginning. Brian and I have been married for 4 years, together for 7, and I always knew Nancy was, let's say, intense. You know, one of those mothers who calls her adult children 3 times a day, who has opinions about everything, who has comments about your clothes, your job, your cooking, literally everything. But Brian is a sweetheart, like the most patient and considerate. Man, I know, and I thought I could handle Nancy because, well, how bad could it get? Spoiler alert. Very, very bad. When I got pregnant last year, it was like a dream come true for us. We'd been trying for almost 2 years, and when I finally saw those 2 lines on the pregnancy test, I literally cried for an hour straight while Brian hugged me and also cried. We were 28 and 29 respectively. We had good jobs, a house, we were ready. Penelope was going to be the first grandchild in the family, and I honestly thought that would make Nancy calm down a bit. That maybe she'd get excited and be nicer to me. How naive I was. Seriously. The first weird sign was when we announced the pregnancy. We were at a family dinner. You know, one of those where Nancy prepares like enough food to feed an army even though there are only 6 of us, and Brian gave the news. His sister, Rebecca, who's 28 and is literally one of my favorite people in the world, screamed with excitement and ran to hug us. Kayla, the younger sister who's 24, was also super excited. But Nancy just sat there with a completely fake smile and only said something like, "What interesting news," in a tone that made me feel like I'd announced I had chicken pox instead of that I was pregnant. Brian noticed his mom's weird reaction but didn't say anything at that moment. That night, when we got home, he told me that maybe Nancy was just processing the news, that it was a big thing for her first grandchild and all that. And I wanted to believe him. I really did, because the alternative was admitting that my mother-in-law basically hated the idea of me having a baby with her son, which was too weird to process. What happened next only confirmed my worst suspicions. Nancy started calling more often, but not to ask how I was feeling or if I needed anything, but to give me unsolicited advice about literally everything. That I was eating too much, that I shouldn't be working so hard, that my doctor was competent. Spoiler, my doctor is amazing and has like 20 years of experience. That I was doing enough exercise but not too much. It was exhausting. And the worst part is that she said everything in this super sweet voice, like she was being the most helpful mother-in-law in the world, but I could feel the poison underneath. Brian started noticing it more when I was like in my 5th month. Nancy would call him at work, something she'd never done before, to complain that I wasn't including her in the baby's decisions. And you know what decisions? Things like the color of Penelope's nursery walls. We chose a soft mint green. Or what stroller to buy. Or if we were going to do birthing classes. Like, things that are our decisions as a couple, not the entire extended families. But Nancy saw it as a personal offense that we didn't ask her permission for everything. The situation got dramatically worse when Rebecca told us she was getting married. Rebecca and her boyfriend Jacob, who's also 30 and has been Brian's friend since college, had been together for 5 years and finally got engaged. The wedding was planned for September, and I'd be 38 weeks by that date, basically about to pop. Rebecca asked me to be one of her bridesmaids, along with Kayla, and I was super excited because Rebecca and I get along incredibly well. But I was also realistic. So I went to talk to Rebecca like 2 weeks after she asked me. We met for coffee. Well, her coffee. Me decaf because pregnancy. And I told her, "Look, Rebecca, I'd love to be your bridesmaid, but I'm going to be huge for your wedding. Like days away from giving birth. And I probably won't be able to participate in all the activities, and I might not even be able to go to the wedding if Penelope decides to arrive early." I offered to help her with whatever planning she needed, but suggested that maybe Kayla could be the maid of honor instead of me. And here's where Rebecca's magic shines. Because you know what she did? She laughed, gave me a huge hug, and told me, "Heather, obviously I understand. You're one of my best friends, and the only thing that matters is that you're there if you can and that you and the baby are healthy. The rest is just a party." She told me Kayla would be happy to be maid of honor, and that she just wanted me to be comfortable. We cried a little. Pregnancy hormones had me super sensitive. We laughed, and I thought everything was perfect. But it turns out Nancy found out, and I don't know how, she interpreted it as me trying to ruin Rebecca's wedding. One day, like 2 weeks after that conversation with Rebecca, Nancy showed up at my work without warning. My work. Can you believe it? I'm an accountant at a small firm and I have my own office. Thank God, because Nancy came in furious saying she needed to talk to me. My boss, who's a super calm guy in his 60 seconds, peeked out, worried, but I signaled to him that I was okay, though honestly I wasn't. Nancy closed my office door and started telling me I was selfish. How dare I make Rebecca's wedding about me and my pregnancy, that I was trying to steal the spotlight from her daughter. I was sitting there, at 27 weeks pregnant, completely shocked, trying to explain to her that Rebecca had been completely okay with everything, that it was a joint decision, but Nancy didn't want to listen. She accused me of manipulating Rebecca, of being a bad influence, and of trying to drive Brian away from his family. It was so bizarre and so out of place that I honestly didn't know how to react beyond asking her to leave my office, which she eventually did, but not without first telling me I wasn't good enough for her son. I called Brian crying, obviously, and he was furious. That night, he went to talk to his mom and told her she was completely out of line, that she couldn't keep treating me like that, especially now that I was pregnant and vulnerable. Nancy supposedly apologized to him, but she never called me directly to apologize. And things got weird. After that, she stopped calling as much, but when she did, she was super cold to me, almost as if I didn't exist. The following months were kind of tense but manageable. Rebecca was super excited about her wedding. Kayla turned out to be an incredible maid of honor, and I helped with what I could from a distance, like choosing flowers and giving opinions on the menu. Brian and I focused on preparing for Penelope. We fixed up her room, bought all the baby stuff, took our birthing classes. My pregnancy was going perfectly, no complications, and my doctor told me everything looked great, and I'd probably make it to my due date without problems. Rebecca's wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in September, and I'd be exactly 38 weeks and 4 days. My doctor had given me the green light to go as long as I felt okay and promised not to get too far from the hospital, which was 20 minutes from the wedding venue. Brian and I decided to go, obviously, because we weren't going to miss his sister's wedding unless I was literally in labor. The day of the wedding, I woke up feeling fine. A little uncomfortable because I had a nearly 7-pound human squeezing all my internal organs, but nothing out of the ordinary. Penelope had been super active all that week, moving like crazy, and my belly was huge, I couldn't see my feet even if I tried. I put on a navy blue maternity dress I'd bought specifically for the wedding, some flat shoes because I wasn't going to try wearing heels, and Brian told me I looked beautiful, even though I felt like a whale. We arrived at the venue around 2 inches the afternoon. The ceremony started at 4, but Rebecca wanted us there early to take pictures with her and Kayla, which I thought was super sweet. The place was beautiful, a garden with an old house they'd converted into an event venue, with lots of trees and flowers everywhere. It was kind of hot, 82 degrees, and I was already sweating just from walking from the parking lot. We went up to the second floor where Rebecca and Kayla were getting ready. Rebecca looked absolutely beautiful in her wedding dress, like a princess. And when she saw me come in, she ran to hug me, as fast as she could run in that dress. She told me she was so happy I'd been able to come and asked me how I was feeling. I told her I was fine, just a little hot, and she immediately got me a chair and a glass of ice water. We spent an hour taking pictures, laughing, helping Rebecca with last-minute makeup. Nancy was there too, because obviously she's the mother of the bride, but she basically completely ignored me, which honestly was a relief. Brian was with Jacob and the other groomsmen, probably having drinks and laughing about something. You know how men are at weddings. Around 3:30, I started feeling like I needed to use the bathroom, which was completely normal because Penelope was literally using my bladder as a pillow. I told Rebecca I was going to the bathroom and would be back in a minute. She pointed me to the bathroom at the end of the second-floor hallway, a super nice bathroom with those antique sinks and a huge mirror. It was a single bathroom, not like public bathrooms with multiple stalls, but an individual one with a door that locked. I went into the bathroom, did what I needed to do, and when I was washing my hands, I felt something weird, like a super strong pressure, and then, suddenly, a gush of warm liquid running down my legs. I stood there, looking at myself in the mirror, completely in shock, because I had just understood what had happened. My water had broken. Right there, in the bathroom of my sister-in-law's wedding venue, half an hour before the ceremony was supposed to start, my damn water had broken. My first thought was, this can't be happening. This has to be a joke. My second thought was, I need to call Brian right now. I took my phone out of my purse, which I'd left on the sink, and was about to call Brian when the bathroom door opened. I hadn't locked it because I thought I was only going to be there for a second. And Nancy walked in. Nancy looked at me, looked at the puddle of liquid on the floor, and her expression changed completely. It was like a mixture of horror and anger, like, how dare you do this here? And I was standing there, with my phone in my hand, completely soaked in amniotic fluid, starting to feel the first contractions, and all I could manage to say was, Nancy, my water broke, I need to go to the hospital, and here's where everything went to hell in a way I still can't believe. Nancy came into the bathroom, closed the door behind her, and locked it. Locked it. She looked at me with a face I'd never seen on her before, like a mixture of contempt and determination, and she told me in a super calm voice that scared me more than if she'd screamed, You're not going to ruin Rebecca's day. You're going to stay here quietly until the ceremony is over. I thought she was joking, like it has to be a bad joke. But when I tried to approach the door, she stood in front of it and took the phone from my hand. She put it in her purse and told me she couldn't let me make a scene and ruin the most important moment of her daughter's life. I told her, I literally begged her, Nancy, please, I'm in labor. My baby is coming. I need to go to the hospital now. But she just shook her head and said, first labors take hours. That I was being dramatic, that I could wait an hour without making a scene. I tried to scream, but she covered my mouth with her hand, so hard it hurt me, and hissed in my ear that if I made any noise, she'd make sure Brian never met his daughter. I don't know if it was an empty threat or if she really meant it, but the terror in that moment completely paralyzed me. She let me go and left the bathroom, locking the door from the outside. I heard her walk away with her heels on the wooden hallway, and I was left there, trapped, in labor, without a phone, with no way to call for help. The first thing I did was try to open the door, obviously, but it was locked, and the door was super thick wood, like antique. I banged on the door. I screamed. But the problem was we were on the second floor. Everyone was downstairs starting to sit for the ceremony, and there was music playing. No one could hear me. I kept screaming anyway, screaming Brian's name over and over, screaming help until I literally lost my voice and only hoarse sounds came out of my throat. The contractions started getting stronger, closer together. I don't know how much time passed, maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, but each contraction was worse than the last. I sat on the bathroom floor because I couldn't keep standing, and I started to really panic. I thought about Penelope, about how something could go wrong, about how I might need an emergency C-section, and I was trapped in a damn bathroom. I thought about how I could die, how my baby could die, all because of Nancy's sick obsession with not ruining a fucking wedding ceremony. I kept banging on the door between contractions, using all the strength I had left. But I was so tired, so scared, and the pain was so intense that eventually I couldn't anymore. I remember there was a moment where a contraction was so strong I literally saw stars, and after that everything got kind of blurry. The last thing I clearly remember before passing out was thinking about Brian and wondering if he would ever find me. I don't know how long I was unconscious. The next thing I remember is waking up on a stretcher, with Brian next to me crying and squeezing my hand. We were in a moving ambulance. The lights and sirens were on, and there were 2 paramedics working on me, giving me oxygen and checking my vital signs. Brian was telling me, "Baby, I'm here. You're going to be okay. The baby's going to be okay. Please stay with me." Later, I found out what had happened. The ceremony had started. Rebecca had walked down the aisle. They'd said their vows, all the normal stuff. Brian was standing there as a groomsman, but he started getting worried because he couldn't see me anywhere. At first, he thought maybe I'd felt sick and had gone to sit outside or in the car, but something didn't add up. When the ceremony ended and they were taking formal photos, he asked Rebecca if she'd seen me. Rebecca didn't know where I was either and started getting worried too. Kayla mentioned that the last time she'd seen me was when I said I was going to the bathroom, but that had been over an hour ago. Brian started looking for me all over the venue, getting more and more frantic, until he went up to the second floor and heard something, a weak banging coming from the hallway bathroom. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. He yelled my name, and when he got no response, he literally kicked the door down. He found me lying on the floor, unconscious, in a puddle of amniotic fluid and sweat. He called the ambulance immediately while trying to wake me up, and when the paramedics arrived, they said it was a miracle that both Penelope and I were still alive. But here's the part that makes me want to vomit every time I think about it. When Brian was carrying me down the stairs before the ambulance arrived, Nancy appeared, and instead of showing concern or horror at what she'd done, she tried to explain herself. She told Brian, in front of everyone, that I had wanted to stay in the bathroom, that I didn't want to ruin Rebecca's wedding, that she had only been respecting my wishes. Brian looked at her with a fury I'd never seen in him before, and told her she was dead to him. Nancy tried to follow us to the ambulance, but Jacob stopped her. He literally had to hold her back so she wouldn't follow us. And right there, in the middle of the venue parking lot, with all the wedding guests watching, Nancy finally confessed the truth. She told everyone that yes, she had locked me in the bathroom, but it was for Rebecca's own good. That I was dramatic, that labors take hours, and it wasn't a big deal. The trip to the hospital was a blurry nightmare. I remember going in and out of consciousness. I remember Brian talking to me constantly. I remember the pain of contractions that were now coming one after another without rest. When we got to the hospital, they took me straight to a labor room, and my doctor, the amazing Dr. Martinez, was already there waiting for me because Brian had called her from the ambulance. I was dilated to 8 centimeters when they checked me, and Penelope's heart rate was irregular, showing signs of fetal distress. Dr. Martinez quickly explained that they were going to monitor Penelope closely, but they were going to try for a vaginal delivery, because at that point it was safer than an emergency C-section. Everything happened super fast after that. 2 more hours of labor, of pushing, of screaming, with Brian by my side the whole time telling me I was strong, that I could do it. And then, at 8:37 p.m. that September Saturday, Penelope was born, tiny but perfect, screaming with all her lungs, 6 pounds and 8 ounces of pure perfection. When they put her on my chest for the first time and I felt her warm skin against mine, I cried like I'd never cried before. Not just from relief that she was okay, that we were both okay, but also from all the trauma of the last few hours, from how close we'd come to this ending in tragedy. Brian held her with tears running down his face, and I'll never forget the way he looked at her, with so much love and wonder that I felt like my heart was going to explode. Dr. Martinez told us we'd been very lucky, that if Brian hadn't found me when he did, things could have been very different. She told me that what Nancy had done was not only cruel but criminally dangerous, and that we should consider pressing charges. Around 10 at night, when Penelope and I were already stabilized and in a recovery room, there was a knock at the door. It was Rebecca, Jacob, and Kayla, still in their wedding outfits. Rebecca's eyes were red from crying, and she ran to hug me as soon as she came in. She apologized to me like 1,000 times, even though obviously none of this had been her fault. I told her not to be ridiculous, that her wedding had been beautiful, or at least the first 20 minutes before I was locked in a bathroom, and that the only thing that mattered was that Penelope was here and healthy. Kayla was also crying and hugged me very carefully, like she was afraid of breaking me. And then Jacob, who's a super reserved guy normally, told me that what his future mother-in-law had done was unforgivable and that the whole family was on Brian's and my side. He told me Nancy had been escorted out of the venue by security after she confessed what she'd done, and that several guests had been in absolute shock. Rebecca held Penelope and started crying again, saying she was the most beautiful baby in the world. They took pictures with her, ridiculously cute pictures of Rebecca in her wedding dress holding my newborn, and they promised me this was going to be a story we'd tell Penelope when she was older, about how she almost was born on her aunt's wedding day. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Brian was completely devastated by what his mom had done. He kept repeating that he couldn't believe she'd been capable of something like that he knew she was controlling, but he never thought she'd put our lives in danger. He called Nancy and told her he never wanted to see her again, that she no longer had a son, that she'd lost any right to meet her granddaughter. Nancy tried to come to the hospital like 3 times, but Brian had given instructions to the security staff not to let her up. She called constantly, sent messages, but Brian blocked her number. His dad, who's been divorced from Nancy for like 10 years, called to apologize on her behalf and to tell us he understood if we never wanted to have contact with that side of the family again, but that he hoped he could meet his granddaughter someday. Brian told him he was always welcome, that this was only about Nancy. I was so physically and emotionally exhausted that I honestly didn't even have energy to be angry. I just wanted to focus on Penelope, on learning to be a mom, on healing from all the trauma. Dr. Martinez had explained to me that the extreme stress and lack of medical attention during my labor could have caused serious complications, and that I needed to rest a lot and monitor any weird symptoms. Brian wanted to press criminal charges against Nancy, like attempted murder or something. But honestly, I just wanted it all to be over. I told him I didn't have the strength for a long legal process, that I just wanted to go home with our baby and start our life as a family. He respected my decision, even though I know it still bothers him that he didn't do more. We were discharged from the hospital 3 days later, and I thought we could finally have peace. But Nancy wasn't going to give up that easily. The first night at home, around 1 the morning, someone knocked on the door so hard that Penelope woke up crying. Brian went to see who it was, and it was Nancy, completely unhinged, screaming that she had a right to see her granddaughter, that we were cruel and selfish, that she'd only made a mistake. Brian called the police, and Nancy was removed from our property with a warning. But that didn't stop her. She started sending text messages, first trying to apologize, then becoming increasingly hostile. Messages saying that I had taken her son away from her, that Penelope should have been her chance to be a better mother, that I had ruined everything by being dramatic. And here's the part that still gives me nightmares. In one of the messages, Nancy literally wrote, "That baby was stealing my son from me even before she was born. I had to do something to stop it. I had to make the wedding perfect for Rebecca, because it was the last time I'd have all my children to myself before that thing changed everything forever." She called Penelope that thing, my perfect, innocent baby. Brian was devastated when he read those messages, and he finally understood that his mom wasn't just controlling or overprotective, but that she had serious problems. Rebecca and Kayla also completely cut contact with Nancy after finding out about the messages. Rebecca told me she felt guilty for not having noticed how badly Nancy treated me during my pregnancy, but I assured her no one could have predicted this. Kayla, bless her, took the initiative to organize a family intervention. She got Brian's dad, an uncle, and some other close family members to join in trying to get Nancy to seek psychiatric help. Nancy finally agreed to see a psychiatrist, who after several sessions determined she didn't have any diagnosable mental illness beyond a generalized anxiety disorder that could be treated with therapy and medication. The psychiatrist concluded that Nancy's actions had been the product of extreme jealousy and need for control, but that she was completely aware of her actions and their consequences. That almost made everything worse, you know? Because it meant Nancy had chosen to do what she did. It wasn't that she had an illness that made her not understand. It was that she simply didn't care about putting our lives at risk as long as she maintained control over her family. With the help of a lawyer, we managed to get a restraining order against Nancy. She can't come within 500 feet of our house, my work, or any place where we are with Penelope. She also can't try to contact us in any way. It was an exhausting process, but necessary to feel like Penelope was safe. Now Penelope is 3 months old. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And Brian is an incredible dad. We're slowly recovering from the trauma of everything that happened. I go to therapy weekly to deal with the PTSD from the experience, and Brian is also in therapy to process his mother's betrayal. Rebecca comes to visit us all the time and is the most incredible aunt, always bringing little gifts for Penelope and offering to babysit when we need a break. Kayla is also a present and loving aunt. Brian's dad came to meet Penelope last month and cried with happiness holding her, apologizing for what Nancy had done even though he had nothing to do with it. I still have days where I struggle to process everything. Sometimes at night, when I'm feeding Penelope and I see her so tiny and helpless, I start crying thinking about what could have happened. But I also feel incredibly grateful that we're both here, healthy, surrounded by people who love us and protect us. Last week, Penelope smiled at me for the first time, for real, not just from gas. And in that moment, I felt that everything we went through was worth it to get to this point. Nancy lost the chance to know this beautiful little person, and that's her loss, I guess. We're going to be okay.